All right, welcome back to Inside the Birds Analytics. It's Geoff Mosher, and of course, our analytics expert, Sam Finkel, joins us as we continue this series looking at NFL draft prospects and how they profile from an athleticism versus production standpoint against each other here, as they look to be, they all want to be first-round draft picks. They won't, but where they fall in the draft, and then we'll compare them to last 4 years of first-round draft picks, top 100 draft picks, and then just anybody drafted at all over the last 4 years at this position. And we're doing cornerbacks in this episode. And this one's interesting, Sam, because you have a guy in TravisHunter, right? Before we even get to the charts, who I don't know, teams see him as a corner, teams see him as a wide receiver, teams see him as both. I mean, we could have he would not be the first player to play a second position in the NFL, but we have not seen a player sort of do the whole, I don't know, equal level of each. I don't know if we're going to see that again, but he's definitely an interesting profile.
Yeah, 100%. You really don't see that, and it's actually probably discouraged at the highest level because you got to keep yourself fresh, and it's hard to play one position in the NFL, let alone two.
Right.
But Hunter he's that kind of player. I mean, he is generational.
Yeah, certainly. Certainly he won the Heisman because he was basically a unicorn, one of one type of college player. We haven't gotten into offense, so I don't know if you've done the wide receiver scatter chart yet, too. I'm sure you'll put him on it when you do. It'll be interesting to see at the end of this which one he sort of profiles better at, or if he even does profile better at one over the other.
Yeah, I think that would be a fun one to do. I have not done the receivers at this point of recording. But yeah, it'll be fun to check out.
And all right, what really jumps out, and we talked about it, is TravisHunter here. I mean, if for those who may have to, you see all these dots, and it took me a minute to find the name, but he's all the way here on the right. And this is, again, this year's class compared to the last 4 years of first-round draft picks. TravisHunter is as productive of a college cornerback as there has been over the last 4 years. And by the way, only a little bit underneath the athletic testing score, which is around an 81 average here too. So really no concern.
We talked about shocking that he would fall under that threshold. Yeah. But I think that's a testament to the athleticism of the other corners in this class, particularly someone we'll talk about in a little bit in the top left.
Yeah. Wow. That's yep. This is an interesting group because a lot of these guys, compared to the last 4 years of first rounders, there's only two blue chippers, and that would be Hunter and it's Jahdae Barron or Jahdae Barron or Jahdae Barron?
Let's just call him Barron.
Barron. All right. JB, we're going to call him.
JB, we promise you we will learn your name.
He's out of Texas, which obviously had a great year. And yeah, he's the guy. It just jumps out where he is in the quadrant. That when I was looking at the chart, Sam, that's why I couldn't find TravisHunter at first, because my eyes immediately went to Jahdae Barron. But obviously there'll be some other guys probably taken in the first round. Will Johnson from Michigan, he just falls a little short production, but he is over the athletic testing mark, and Benjamin Morrison over the athletic testing mark as well. And we know that athletic testing is really big. We talked about inside linebacker in the last one, and we said some teams just don't. It's okay. They want like a guy who can key and diagnose, can stack and shed. They're not worried if he runs, a 4.2 40 or anything. But here you've got corner. You really want these guys to be able to test well.
Yeah, I mean, when you're on your own on the outside, it's fundamentals, but athleticism, right? I mean, you can be as fundamentally sound as you want, but if you're getting run by, there's no value there.
Well, you mentioned one guy who's probably not getting run by, Tommy Hill, all the way up here at, I guess this is 94 and a half, when the average athletic testing is at 81, it seems. So, I mean, this guy blows the charts off. This is your typical workout warrior. The production, not very good here at below 60 compared to the 84 average, but athleticism through the roof.
Yeah, and this hidden gem is Nebraska, of all places.
Yeah, that's always what gives you the fast runners. You got Nebraska.
Seriously. How could I have been mistaken there?
What's Matt Rule doing over there? Let's turn our attention to Maxwell Hairston, because he's a kid out of, I believe, Kentucky.
Yeah.
right? Who had a top. I can't call him top 30 visits because they shouldn't be. He had a 30 visit with the Philadelphia Eagles, and he's a guy who tests fairly well. Even if he's not as productive, he tests really well.
Yeah, and again, the testing at this position is imperative.
Right. And what this chart really shows you, Sam, is that this year's crop of corners, there are a lot of guys that don't measure up from a production standpoint or athleticism standpoint as guys taken in the first round over the last 4 years. So this is not a bad thing for these guys. It just means they're probably not first rounders because they don't test like first rounders, but they probably weren't going to be first rounders anyway.
Right. And I feel like it's more fair to judge them, as we go down in the thresholds. But that being said, there are a lot of guys that don't meet the thresholds, as you'll see later.
Oh, okay. Interesting stuff. If anything, you just come away from this thing feeling like TravisHunter is about as sure of a thing as you can get, and Barron's really not too far behind.
Yeah, actually, the argument might be Barron might be better suited just as a pure corner. Because he fits squarely in that top right quadrant as opposed to being fringe like Hunter.
Right.
And I think it's valid to have Barron as CB1 for some people.
Yeah.
Again, Hunter is probably, has to be higher as just an athlete. And I guess it's weird because athleticism score is in favor of Barron, but just the uniqueness and of TravisHunter has to push him in some circles.
Absolutely. Sounds like you can't go wrong with either. All right. So we'll move here and go to now cornerbacks. This is a comparison of with the Eagles also involved. This is still the last 4 years, but now you have the Eagles involved in it. And boy, Cooper DeJean. Remember what I said about those Iowa guys?
Very, very fast. Always the best athletic testers, Iowa.
Yeah.
Okay, he's the exception, but still.
But he is not only does he beat the athletic testing, but also far ahead in the production as well.
Yeah. I think the next guy you got to talk about is the guy that was drafted before him in the top left quadrant, Q. And I remember when we went to the Senior Bowl, that was the guy I couldn't keep my eyes off of, and I was so excited that the Eagles drafted him. And there was a lot of risk in drafting him, right? Because we talked about it in one of the other podcasts about Toledo. Like, it's an unknown. How do you factor? But his athleticism was off the charts. And as the first corner taken in last year's draft, I mean, you see, it's not a top right guy that got taken. It's a guy in the top left.
Correct. And production, again, I think playing at Toledo probably impacted that. And if you're never thrown at, maybe your numbers are a little skewed. And plus he played all exclusively in zone as well. And that can change some of the production numbers and rates and things like that. But that's why athletic testing is so big at that position. That's the one thing that's sort of inarguable. Can he run? Can he short shuttle? Can he move the hips? I mean, and certainly Quinyon Mitchell proved that he was all that as far as an athlete.
Absolutely.
Here we go with Tommy Hill, still up there, not surprisingly. But also with other Eagles, Keely Ringo, not too far from the athletic. I mean, he's a very good athlete, a little stiff-hipped because he's a tall physical guy, and that's kind of common among tall physical guys, but not too far underneath both the athleticism and the production mark. Yeah, you could say he falls into the lower quadrant here, the avoid quadrant. But again, he was a 4th-round pick, not a 1st-round pick. So that's why.
It would be more fair to judge him as we go down in the charts for sure.
Correct. And that's why Adoree Jackson, who tested really well coming out of USC many years ago, you could see where he was actually lower.
Yeah, surprisingly. I was a little surprised too because I remember he tested well too.
Yeah.
But it's there's a lot more that goes into it than just the testing. It's to your measurements as well.
Correct. And he's a 5'8" guy, I believe.
Yeah, he might be listed 5'9", but I don't think he is.
I would agree with you on that. All right, so let's take a look at this year's cornerback class compared to this is now the top 100 over the last. Top 100 over the last 4 years. And boy, now it almost looks like a total equal. I don't know what I'm bad at geometry, but like all the quadrants appear somewhat equal.
We could call it distribution. I even if wanted
There
to.
you go. There you go. There's no such thing as an equilateral square, I don't think. But if there were, this is what it might look like.
Well, by its very nature, squares are equilateral, so you're good.
There you go. See, that's why I have you here. You can see Will Johnson and Ben Morrison move into that blue chip category when you compare them over guys top 100 over the last 4 years.
Yeah, and as you can see, Hunter is now squarely also in this blue chip category instead of being fringe.
Right, right. And our friend Maxwell Hairston, who took a visit to the Eagles, again, squarely in that gems box. So if you're looking at round 2, perhaps, maybe round 3, depending on – see, corners, there's always a run of corners. That's the thing. Corners get overdrafted in the NFL. So there have been guys who I've been told by teams, we had him as a 2, we had him as a 3. They go in the bottom of the first round, early in the second, because there's just everybody wants them, and there's just not that many good ones.
Yeah, and that's just positional scarcity at its finest, and that's why runs happen, right? I mean, sometimes you have to draft over a position over value too, and it just gets tough.
Right. All right. And even Tommy Hill still Tommy Hill's not going to change. He's going to be a guy who would test through the roof and was not very productive, but someone's going to get tantalized by that athletic testing.
Yeah, it'll probably push him higher, like a lot higher than he probably would have been had he not tested at all.
Sure.
Well, definitively we'll do that, but
right. And then here we go with Eagles now thrown in compared to top 100 picks over the last 4 years, and bam! Look what it did to Keely Ringo.
That's why I said wait on it, because I knew that's where he would fall, and I think it's very interesting that he falls there.
It really is interesting because he will be given an opportunity as we sit here now and look at the landscape to compete for a starting job, and he was a 4th round pick, so he was not a top 100 pick. If I'm correct on that, right?
Correct. You're correct.
All right, so he has outperformed from a college production and athleticism standpoint, other guys who have been taken ahead of him.
There you go.
Very interesting. And Eli Ricks falls in there at the bottom quadrant. We see him show up. Now, interesting.
Give him one more. Give him one more chance. You know,
all right.
He'll be all right. I promise.
Interesting thing about this chart with the Eagles on it and how there are 3 of the 4 in the upper right quadrant, 3 of the 5. Okay. If you were to have done this chart for Eagles cornerbacks in any of the last 20 years prior to 2024, it would have looked like a disaster. They wouldn't even be anywhere. They'd probably be in this bottom low area, right?
Yeah, everyone except for Brandon Boykin.
That's right. That's true. Although
gotta show love
you
to
may have had some guys who were up here because they tested well. I'm guessing they're like a Curtis Marsh or somebody who was a former running back, but yeah, from a production and athletic testing, it would not have looked good.
Yeah, you're probably right.
I mean, where would the Goblin have fallen?
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah,
let's find
out. He might have been helped by production at LSU, I believe, is where Jalen Mills went.
Yeah, so his production score is 69.
Okay, so he would be here.
And his athleticism score is 65.
And that would put him like in this Jalen Smith, Mello Dotson area.
There you go.
Yeah. And that's probably one of the better remarks for an Eagles corner prior to 2024.
Absolutely.
Good stuff. All right. Shannon Revel. He's an interesting one. Siobhan Revel. I'm sorry. Siobhan Revel is from East Carolina. So interesting small school guy to look at who seems to get better as you widen the lens.
Yeah, and like I said, as you widen the lens, more names will become in this draftable categories, which is pretty much everywhere except for the bottom left.
Of course.
And for corners, you really are looking more at the top than the bottom at all.
Right.
Because a guy that's fundamental at corner is kind of
Yeah, it will be interesting to see where Benjamin Morrison goes. He's a kid from Notre Dame. Notre Dame had a really good defense. He was a good player on it. So we will see. I mean, he's a guy who I can see being bottom, like top 40, bottom first, early second round pick.
I think that's right where he slots in for sure.
Sure. Okay. All right. And now this is the widest of the lens. This is any cornerback drafted over the last 4 years and where this class um, stacks up against it. So now you're seeing Rebels in there. Uh, Barron Hunter, still the same. Maxwell Harrison from Kentucky now looks like a guy that if you take in the draft, you're gonna and compare him to anybody else who was drafted, you'll be all right.
Yeah, and he would be an excellent addition anywhere outside of the first round. And
Right.
honestly, even maybe he's not a first round talent uh, in terms of like where he'd actually fit.
Mhm.
But if you take him early, I guess in the top 100, he's still okay.
Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, these guys are pretty high above the baseline athleticism when you're just drafted talking drafted corners.
Yeah,
So that should get him, if not I would think day 2 for Maxwell Hairston
yeah, I think so
and
too.
Revel. Yeah, definitely Revel. Are you surprised by the number of corners this year that fall into the lower left quadrant, the bust quadrant?
It is the highest bust quadrant we've had, and I hate I know I labeled it bust, but I
Yeah,
hate saying that because there are guys that are successful in that. I mean, Jalen Mills is an example, right? He'd still be
right.
in this
In
area.
this area here, yeah.
And I also looked it up just because I wanted to. Brandon Boykin, it was 76 and 60.
Which one? 76 production or athleticism?
76 production, 60 athleticism. So
60.
he'd barely be in that safe quadrant, you
Yeah,
know?
he'd be safe because he produced well. He played at Georgia, if I'm not
Yeah.
mistaken. Wow, I forgot about that. The Eagles actually did draft players from Georgia back in the day, just not very many.
Yeah.
And oddly enough, not the greatest athletes in the world. So
Right? And who would have thought from Georgia, right?
very interesting. All right, and now this is where you add. Oh, look at you! You had Eli Ricks. You teased this.
I did. I
All right.
believed in him.
A little bit more productive in college than your average drafted corner. And listen, this guy wasn't drafted, right? He was a rookie free agent. So that's a win for the Eagles in the analytics game.
Yeah. I mean, listen, if you can get anybody undrafted on the outside quadrants, I feel like that's a win.
Yeah, 100%. All right, good stuff there. And then you see guys like Kobe Bryant, Noah Williams, they become a little bit safer here in this
Yeah.
regard. Kobe
And his
Bryant,
teammate Mello Dotson right on the fringe.
right. Bryant from Kansas, I believe. Yep.
Yes.
And where is Mello Dotson? He
Also
is
Kansas.
Kansas. Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay. Good stuff there. All right. Let's just go check out some extra stuff. So these are your gems. Jahdae Barron, we talked about Hunter, Will Johnson, Benjamin Morrison, Siobhan Revel. These are going to be guys who are probably all go in the top 40 to 50. Maxwell Hairston, T30 visit with the Eagles. Jacob Parrish out of Kansas State, Darian Porter, Iowa State, Tommy Hill. You have him Gem 1. Is that just because of the great athletic testing?
Yeah, that's really it. I mean, he falls in that gem area.
Right.
Yeah, his production's not great, but again, the athleticism is off the charts.
True. You can't blame Big Ten offenses anymore now that they've got the West Coast teams there who like to throw the ball around. USC, right? Washington. Can't just say, "Oh, it's a Nebraska corner. He never sees anybody." All they do is run the Big Ten. That's really not the case anymore. Even Penn State threw the ball quite a bit this year. Ohio State throws the ball, but they do still run the ball.
For
More
sure.
so than you see around other conferences. TravisHunter is in your great one. He's in a category all unto himself.
Yeah, so because here's the thing, he fits into that safe area, which I normally would put good, but he's so close. I
Mhm.
needed to make his own category for him, and that's just because of where he fell. If he was a little bit further, I would have said good one, but I think it needs to be great.
Fair, very fair. And then, as you mentioned, a lot of guys falling into that, good to fringe to avoid category this year.
Yeah, and I color coded that even because I was like, there are some guys that you should avoid, and there's some guys you should avoid.
If I hope BJ Adams doesn't watch this pod, man. He's like the official code maroon, Auburn red, like to avoid at all costs from UCF.
I'm sure his teammate, he has a corner teammate on there too, but I'm also sure RJ Harvey will make up for that when we do running backs.
Pretty much. All right, great stuff. Those are the corners. And next time we do this, we'll talk about safeties. For Sam Finkel, I'm Geoff Mosher. You've been watching another edition of ITV Analytics.